Welcome back to Autism Live. We're very excited right now because joining us via Skype is Paul Worthington. He is the Director of Research and Development for the Lindamood-Bell Learning Processes. This is a wonderful company. We've actually done an interview before about Lindamood-Bell, but it's been a while. And just the other day on the show, we had two brothers, the Cox brothers, who were on here talking about the amazing things that they're doing in their lives. And we asked them, like, what do you attribute your success? And one of the things that they mentioned was Lindamood-Bell. I love when I go to a conference and whenever there's Lindamood-Bell is there, because my favorite thing on the planet, and I'm holding it up here, Paul, you guys give away these wonderful Post-it note, little notebooks. I never go anywhere without my Lindamood-Bell Post-it notes. So, just a side thing.
There you go. If you need more of them, just let me know.
Oh, you could, like, that's a wonderful gift for me whenever, like, I love them. They're truly wonderful. So Paul, welcome. I don't know that I thought about it before. I didn't realize that there was a research and development portion of Lindamood-Bell, which just makes us like you even more. I think a lot of people just think of it as an educational support that helps their children to learn more and get more out of the education that they get. But the fact that you have research and development is very exciting. Tell us just briefly about, for people who don't know about Lindamood-Bell Learning Processes and your research and development department.
Sure. We developed the R&D department. Now it's been, I'm guessing, close to 25 years ago. The reason being twofold. One, the major issue is, while we've experienced a great deal of success in addressing the needs of kids who have language processing deficits, there's still so much we don't know. And so that was really kind of the impetus behind conducting additional research, because there's always room for improvement in our programs and processes that we've developed and engaged in over the last 30 plus years. The second reason is that, from an internal standpoint, we really wanted to take a look at monitoring the fidelity and the ongoing development of programs within our organization. You know, we're now up to over 100 centers around the country, internationally, in both the Atlantic and the Pacific, Australia, England, soon to be Dubai, of all places. If we have the research capacity that would allow us to monitor whether or not we're actually improving on the processes, that's an important consideration. So internally, I do research on the work that we do across the corporation within the various sectors, and the work that we do with schools, and the work that we do in our Lindamood-Bell Academy, which is basically our internal schooling operation. If we're working internationally, for example, in Honduras, we're doing some work down there. What's that look like as compared to what we do in our centers? We're working in schools. And so that was the second reason. Back to the first reason, which was that forced us to engage in collaborations with research universities, especially now that the neuroscience of being able to understand what's physiologically going on in the human brain, that technology is so robust, that gave us a new way to validate whether or not we're actually increasing those areas, the functionality of those areas in the brain that are predictably related to good language processing and cognitive skills.
Well, and just to clarify, Lindamood-Bell Learning Process, do you guys say it processes or processes?
Processes, yeah.
Processes.
Either's fine.
Okay. So, but this is not something that is just for individuals on the autism spectrum, but you guys have an entire division that specializes in folks on the autism spectrum. Is that correct?
It's not a division specifically. It is within a division on our Learning Center operations, but it crosses over. I mean, we wind up in our school contracts where we're training teachers out in public education, for example. They're using the same programs, only applying it to kids on the spectrum who are within public education.
Got it.
In my division, where we're working on the research side, we collaborate with universities to conduct studies to look at the approaches that we recommend where it applies to addressing the needs of children who have autism. And clearly in all of our centers, I mean, kids come in who are on the autism spectrum. So we have to cross-train a whole lot of people in order to meet the needs of kids who are on the spectrum.
Okay, wonderful. Now, you mentioned language processing deficits on the autism spectrum. And I think a lot of parents are probably like, wait a second, because they're used to just talking about language deficits, but I don't think the average parent necessarily thinks of it as a processing. And so it's probably, for some parents hearing that, it might be an exciting thing to hear that, oh, wait a minute, there's a process there, and maybe if we rectify some things that there will be benefits. So in terms of when you guys are working with individuals, how prevalent is this, having a language processing deficit?
Sure. We got involved in this largely as a result of some collaborative work that we had done at a kind of a superficial level with Carnegie Mellon and University of Pittsburgh back in Pennsylvania. And one of the interesting phenomena, which we agreed with, having seen a number of kids on the spectrum, is that what they call the comorbidity is not a very friendly word, but all that means in clinical terms is how many kids on the spectrum also have very specific deficits on the language processing side. In other words, in those areas, for example, in reading, specifically within reading, one of the primary deficits that jumps up around 50% of the time, depending on who it is that you're reading in the research community, is children on the autism spectrum will have very severe, moderate to severe difficulties in understanding or comprehending what they read and or hear. And that's kind of counterintuitive because so frequently kids on the spectrum, you can take a fifth grade child and give him a college textbook and he can decode the print on the page, but he can't get anywhere near understanding what it is that he reads. And so we have a program that specifically addresses language comprehension, and that awareness ultimately led to a collaboration with the University of Alabama in Birmingham with Rajesh Khanna and his colleagues as part of a federal grant to take a look at the specific interventions that we had developed to address language comprehension, only specifically do a controlled randomized experiment in working with kids on the spectrum to see not only could we improve their language comprehension from a reading behavioral standpoint, but what happens when you do pre and post analysis looking at the functional connectivity or those areas of the brain that are classically associated with being able to comprehend what you read. And so that led to about 3 or 4 years of detailed work seeing what kind of effect we could have in or working with children who in fact did have these diagnosed difficulties.
Wonderful. And so you brought up the magic word that so many autism parents want more information about, comprehension, and some of the different things that you guys are doing to build comprehension. What I'm curious, because you work in the research end of things, what do you see happening? What is research showing you happens in the brain that then changes the equation? Does that make sense, my question?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Indeed, it was a bit of a revelation because we've always thought, traditionally, I should say, both in the neuroscience community as well as in the educational communities, we've always thought, well, there must be an area of the brain that's somehow not functioning the way that it should. And the counterintuitive part of it for kids on the spectrum or individuals who have autism was that they're so frequently extensively gifted in some areas. Why would it be that, and especially in the area of reading, why would it be that they can read so well, but they cannot translate the print in such a way that once they decode it, then they're getting meaning from whatever it is that they read, or for that matter, whatever they were listening to. Well, one of the findings from this study was, and it was a hypothesis when we went into this study, was that there was a idea that was developed again in Pennsylvania, that what they saw in the neurological image of children on the spectrum was that those areas that are involved in cognition or thinking, or specifically where language is concerned, comprehension, what they saw was that there wasn't the connectivity and the white matter in the brain, those areas of the brain that allow for the axons, the dendrites, and so forth, that communicate from one area to the other, were not showing up as efficacious or as fluent as it would in, let's say, normal subjects who have normal comprehension. So we went into these studies, and it's referred to as the underconnectivity hypothesis. The hypothesis being is that children cannot connect from the language area of the brain to those areas of the brain where you translate language, for example, into basic images, where mental imagery is concerned. Then sure enough, that would, in a negative way, affect how well they comprehend what they read and hear. So we went into this. We went into this study.
Do you need to pause because you got a guest for just?
Yeah.
It's so okay.
Sorry.
Come back to me, Traven, so that he can deal with his guest. And we can go ahead and take him off for a second because he's got things going on. And I want to point out to everybody that we're almost done here in the interview. Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. So that's all right. It happens to the best of us, right?
Yeah.
So, anyway, you were saying.
What I was saying was that. So we went into the study thinking, well, that matches what we see with children, and we have a theoretical construct on this, that the program that we developed, that Nancy Bell developed, the Bell part of Lindamood-Bell, was back as far as 1986, 87, was that from a student observation standpoint, when you see, we get these students who come in, they can read fine, but when you ask them to give you some idea that they understood what it was that they read, they can't tell you. And it became apparent, one of the things that Nancy discovered was that it turns out that it didn't appear that they were taking that language in and where they were creating mental representations. Like, you know, it goes along with the old cliche, a picture's worth 1,000 words.
Right.
Well, if you take 1,000 words, how effectively can you translate that? And it turns out that within the cognitive sciences, there was a prominent cognitive scientist up in Canada. His name was Alan Pavio. He developed a theory called dual coding theory. And the simple version of that is that when you try to understand anything, if you're listening to somebody, or for example, if you're reading a book, you translate that into mental images. And the efficiency with which you're able to do that actually correlates very highly with how well you understand what you read. And so Nancy developed a program called Visualizing and Verbalizing. What we did is we took that program, used it with our kids on the spectrum at the University of Alabama as compared to control subjects who did not go through the intervention. And sure enough, we found a validation of this underconnectivity hypothesis, because after the intervention, the fMRIs, and more specifically the technology that's used in brain scans called diffuser tensor imaging, did show, in fact, that we increased the conductivity, or the white matter in the human brain, where those areas of the brain where language is taken in, we're communicating more effectively with those areas of the brain where we create mental representations, for example, in the hippocampus and back in the occipital lobe. And so it was a eureka finding for us to have that validated. We presupposed that that was the case, but we had no way to prove it.
Yeah.
So sure enough, kids on the spectrum do tend to have this underconnectivity. and it disallows or it inhibits their ability to get meaning from what they read and hear.
So just to be clear, you know, these interventions work. You have proof that they work, and it's proof that it shows up on an MRI.
Right.
So that's pretty impressive. So we're just about out of time, but so for our viewers watching who are like, okay, well, where do I go to get this, and what do I walk over to the Lindamood-Bell place, and what do I say so that I can get these services for my kiddo?
Basically, it's just all it takes is a phone call, and we're all over the web to look us up. Contact one of our centers. If you call our main offices here in San Luis Obispo, California, we can easily switch you to a location that's nearest you. I might mention in passing also that the results of the study, those studies of 4 papers have been produced, and those are referentially offered on our website. But the findings from that, we got together with the University of Alabama and wrote another grant. They funded another 5 years of study for us to dig even deeper into these phenomena. And so we're actually looking and recruiting subjects right now from across the United States to be involved in the study. And we can point you directly to the folks in Alabama if there are families that would be interested in having their children participate in the study.
Do they need to be in the Alabama area? Where do they need to be? Okay.
No, we're in the United States.
Okay. All right. So what is the website that they need to go to?
It's lindamoodbell.com. That's straightforward, 1-800-233-1819. And we can direct you to the correct clinical locations and or answer any questions, and folks are feel free to call me if they have specific questions about the research that we've been involved in or that we're currently involved in.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
No worries. Thanks a lot.
You take care.
Yeah, cheers.
All right. Hey, thanks for watching Autism Live. To subscribe, click here. And if you'd like to check out some more of our videos, click here.